In a village nestled at the foot of the great Kilimanjaro, where the earth was rich and the people's hearts were warm, lived a woman named Adama. But her heart was as cold as the mountain's peak. Adama was a landlady, known not for her kindness, but for her cruelty. She owned many of the huts in the village, and she ruled over her tenants with an iron fist. Her face was permanently set in a scowl, her eyes like sharp stones, and her voice could curdle milk. She would raise the rent on a whim, evict families for a single late payment, and laugh at their misfortune. The villagers whispered her name with a mix of fear and resentment, but no one dared to stand up to her. Her wealth and influence were as vast as the shadow of the great mountain. One day, a young woman named Nia arrived in the village. Nia had journeyed from a faraway land, her spirit as bright as the morning sun and her smile as gentle as a cool breeze. She carried nothing but a small bag on her back and a kora, a beautiful stringed instrument. She needed a place to stay, and the only vacant hut belonged to Adama. The villagers warned her, their voices low and urgent. "Be careful, young one," said an old weaver. "That woman's heart is a dried-up riverbed." Nia listened, her expression thoughtful, but she simply nodded and said, "A riverbed can always be filled again." Nia went to Adama's compound. The landlady sat on a large carved stool, counting a pile of cowrie shells. She looked up, her gaze sharp and dismissive. "What do you want?" she snapped. Nia smiled warmly. "I hear you have a hut for rent. I would like to be your tenant." Adama squinted, surprised by the young woman's courage. She named a price that was double the usual rent, expecting Nia to argue or walk away. Instead, Nia just smiled again and said, "That seems fair. I will take it." Adama was taken aback but greedily accepted Nia's initial payment. She gave Nia the key to the most dilapidated hut she owned, one with a leaky roof and a crooked door, and sneered, "Don't be late with the next payment." Nia moved into the little hut and immediately set to work. She patched the roof with fresh thatch, straightened the door, and planted a small garden of vibrant flowers by the entrance. Every evening, she would sit outside her newly repaired home and play her kora. The music that flowed from her fingertips was magical. It wasn't just a collection of notes. It was a story, a feeling, a prayer. The melodies drifted through the village, carrying on the wind. They spoke of hope, of resilience, of the beauty of a new dawn. The villagers, drawn by the enchanting sounds, would gather near her hut. They would listen, their weary faces softening, their spirits lifting. Even the children, who usually played loudly, would sit in quiet awe. Adama heard the music from her large, empty house and it irritated her. Joy was a language she didn't understand. The sound of Nia's kora, and the happiness it brought to others, felt like a personal insult. She decided she had to get rid of this troublesome musician. The next morning, she stormed over to Nia's hut. "Your rent is due," she declared, though it was weeks early. Nia, without a word of protest, reached into her small bag and handed over the exact amount. Adama was stunned. She had been sure Nia wouldn't have the money. "Where did you get this?" she demanded, suspicious. Nia pointed to her kora. "My music provides for me," she said softly. Frustrated, Adama decided to try a different tactic. She announced a new rule. No music was to be played in her properties. She claimed it disturbed her peace. A heavy silence fell over the village that evening. The air felt empty without Nia's beautiful tunes. The villagers missed the nightly gathering, the shared moment of peace. Nia, respecting the landlady's rule, did not play. Instead, she began telling stories. She had a gift for that too. She spun tales of clever spiders, wise tortoises, and brave warriors. Her voice was as captivating as her music, and soon, the crowds were back, huddled around her hut, listening intently, their imaginations set alight. Adama grew even more furious. She couldn't ban storytelling, could she? Her rage festered. She had to find a way to break Nia's spirit. Adama owned the only well in that part of the village. One scorching morning, she stood guard by the well, a large stick in her hand. When Nia approached with her clay pot, Adama blocked her path. "This well is for those who pay," she snarled, inventing a new fee on the spot. 10 cowrie shells for a single pot of water. The villagers gasped. This was outrageous. Water was life. It had always been free for everyone. Nia looked at the cruel landlady, then at the thirsty faces around her. She set down her pot, looked up at the cloudless sky, and began to sing. This time, it wasn't a melody from her kora. It was a song from her soul. Her voice, clear and powerful, rose into the hot, still air. She sang of the parched earth, of the thirsty roots of the baobab tree, of the people's longing for just a drop of rain. It was a song of deep sorrow and deeper hope. As she sang, a strange thing happened. The sky, which had been a harsh, unending blue, began to change. A single, small cloud appeared as if from nowhere. It grew larger and darker, drawn by the power of her song. The villagers watched, their eyes wide with disbelief. The wind picked up, carrying the scent of distant rain. The cloud moved until it was directly over Adama's head. And then, it began to rain. But it didn't rain on the fields or the village. It rained only on Adama. A personal, torrential downpour soaked her from head to toe, plastering her expensive clothes to her skin, and washing the scowl from her face, replacing it with a look of pure shock. The villagers erupted, not in laughter, but in a collective gasp of awe. Nia stopped singing, and the rain stopped as suddenly as it had begun. The cloud dissipated, and the sun shone once more. Adama stood there, dripping and humiliated. She looked at Nia, who was watching her with an expression not of triumph, but of pity. For the first time in her life, Adama felt something other than greed or anger. She felt small. She saw the faces of the villagers, not filled with fear of her, but with admiration for Nia. She saw the community that had formed around this young woman, a community built on shared joy and kindness, a community she had never been a part of. In that moment, something inside her cracked, like dry earth after the first rain. Slowly, humbled, Adama stepped away from the well. She didn't say a word. She walked back to her big, empty house, the squelch of her wet sandals the only sound. From that day on, Adama was a changed woman. She never charged for water again. She lowered the rents and even began to help tenants who fell on hard times. She never became warm and bubbly. That was not her nature, but the hard stone in her chest had softened. And every evening, she would sit on her porch and listen, along with the rest of the village, to the beautiful, magical music of Nia's kora, a sound that had brought not just joy, but a much-needed rain to a parched and lonely heart. The village learned that true power isn't in what you own, but in what you share, and that even the hardest heart can be softened by a song.